I am a member of the Westwood Environmental Action Committee, who's hosting the meeting tonight. Before we get started, I'm going to read our virtual meeting statement. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, on June 16th, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until March 31st, 2023 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order. The October 12th Westwood Environmental Action Committee Phase 2 Solar Community Engagement Session will be conducted via remote participation by the committee. This meeting will be recorded, and does anyone else wish to record the meeting?
No one.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Great, excellent. So just by way of background, tonight's forum is being hosted by the Westwood Environmental Action Committee. For those of you who are not familiar with our committee, we serve as an advisory committee to the Select Board. The committee identifies environmental issues to the Select Board's attention and works with them on solutions that benefit the town and its residents. So I want to start tonight by going around and introducing our speakers for the panel tonight. I'll start with Tom, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Tom Philpin, and I am the energy manager for the town of Westwood, and I'm the person responsible for directing all of the conservation and solar programs in the town.
Great. And Lemma?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lemma Jean-Baptiste. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations in the Westwood Schools.
Great. Mike?
Yep, my name is Mike Backus. I'm part of the founding management team of Amoresco, and I head up the division of our company that develops, owns, and operates energy assets.
Excellent. Tony?
Tony Busher, Senior Project Developer, Amoresco.
And Paul?
Yes, Senior Vice President at Amoresco Distributed Energy Systems, report up to Mike Backus.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So just to review our agenda for this evening, we're going to start by giving a bit of an overview of the Westwood Comprehensive Plan and specifically the renewable energy objectives that are part of that plan. We'll talk a bit about current electric costs and consumption in the town of Westwood, review the Phase 2 solar proposal, as well as benefits, and show a number of renderings of the project. Tom will talk to our timelines, and we'll present some frequently asked questions about the project, and then open it up to questions from the community and community feedback. And I wanted to note that we'll be taking questions in the chat tonight. So when the committee opens the meeting for public comment, we ask that you please enter your question and comments into the Q&A chat function. And please also include your name and address. And then we will read the questions into the record, and our panel of speakers will respond to all inquiries. So now I'm going to pass it over to Tom to give us a bit of background on the comprehensive plan and our objectives.
Okay, by way of starting off, Westwood, as most of you should know or do know, is a green community, and as such, we are committed to a lot of background work in terms of new standards for zoning and so forth, and promoting the conservation and renewable energy in the town. As part of that initial admission as a green community, we made various applications for grants to help us with our conservation projects, and then we initiated, as part of that effort, our solar projects as well. In the 2016-2017 time period, we got 4 solar projects off the ground. We got one at Westwood High School, another at Martha Jones, at Downey, and at Thurston. And this was what we call Phase 1. And then we were looking forward to a Phase 2 after that was complete. In 2020, the town came out with a comprehensive plan, which sort of enshrined in the town goals, the same goals that we had are adapted pretty much as a green community. So the town was promoting that we emphasize trying to get renewable energy and reducing our carbon footprint. So all of this brings us to the phase 2 solar program, which is consistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan and our goal to become and stay as a green community. The next slide, if I may. Just to give you an idea of the background here, the electric bill in Westwood is about $1 million a year. Of that million, about 400,000 is on municipal and 600,000 plus 650 is on the school side. The schools are by far and away the biggest consumer of our electricity, but they are the ones where we concentrate the most in terms of conservation as well. We have, based on the solar that we've already installed, we do receive toward that bill of $1 million. We do receive about $92,000 plus in solar incentives from Eversource and from other groups because of the solar and installations that we have. If you look at where the consumption is again, how much of it is renewable, and we look at the amount of solar that we have and the amount of solar that we're subscribed to through what we call virtual. On the next slide, you'll see that right now we're approximately 52% of our power comes from renewable sources. So we're doing well, but we have a ways to go. And what we would like to do is eventually bring that goal up to at least to 90+% of the consumption in the town. If I may have the next slide. By further way of background, just to give you an idea of how the bills happen and what we're facing here in the town. We have two components in our electric bill. We have supply and delivery. Right now, we have a supply of about 0.99 cents. We have a long-term contract that runs through January 1st of 2027 that guarantees us no change in price for that period. There's a delivery charge that is, again, subject to Eversource and what they may do. And the total is right at the moment is approximately 21 cents a kilowatt hour, which is very reasonable. If we look out to 2027, however, you can easily forecast that these costs are going to rise at least 40 to 50%. So that means that our $1 million bill will be anywhere from 400 to 500,000 higher. So it behooves us as a town that if we want to control that big impact on our budgets, and if we want to reduce emissions and meeting environmental goals, we have to do something. And the most logical thing to do, of course, is conservation and solar. So we're on a plan of doing as much as we can in both of those areas. We need about 3 million kilowatt hours of conservation and solar generation to meet these long-term goals. And solar is the most viable and stable alternative solutions. If we get solar installed to the degree feasible, we will guarantee ourselves a relatively flat electric rate for the 20-year life of the solar panels. So that's what we're heading for: stability in our costs and savings in our costs as much as we can, and as much as we can logically do it. The next slide, please. Where we're looking to put the solar in phase 2 is in 4 major locations and plus a couple others that are possible. The proposed phase 2 solar, which again is subject to final approvals by the select board. The school board has already approved the first one and the second one, and the school board will approve any others that have to do with the schools, as well as the select board having the final say. But all of them will be approving it. But the ones we're looking at, and where we've done a lot of design work, it's the Westwood High School parking lot canopies. That'll be on the student side of the parking lot. On the Thurston Middle School, we've already have solar on the roof of Thurston. And what we'll be doing here is adding approximately 85 kilowatts more of capacity. At the Council on Aging, we're looking to put approximately 300 kilowatts of capacity. And then we're looking to build in the back of the police station and the town hall a series of solar canopies, which eventually they'll touch each other. So it essentially becomes a garage. All of this has been gone over, of course, with both the police chief, with Rena up at the Council on Aging and the school board, and all of them are in agreement with what we're trying to do. On the next slide, you can see we have two other potential additions that we're looking at as well. One would be our Deerfield School, which is there now and is being used, and eventually will be used when they start renovating Sheehan, and then eventually it'll be used for something else, which is yet to be determined. But that building itself will be here for a long time, and we want to put solar on the roof of that and capitalize on its the ability to have a good exposure. And in addition to that, we have our new Hanlon Deerfield School, which is under construction right now, and that will be a near zero consumption school. This is that.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Excuse me. That was Siri telling me what I was doing wrong.
That may be beyond my abilities at the moment.
So we will then would put rooftop solar on top of the new Hanlon Deerfield School, and that would amount to approximately another 170 kilowatts of capacity, or 473 kilowatts of capacity, and that would bring that school to an almost net zero. In other words, they'd be almost completely down to zero consumption of electricity and generating nearly all of its own as it goes forward. So that's kind of where we are with all of that. And the next slide, if you see it, I think we're going to have, yes, we're going to have you talk about a little bit about this, but the phases and the benefits of this, of course, it's going to save over $500,000 over the project life, we feel, and it has zero upfront costs to the community. It's going to reduce our emissions dramatically. It's going to have zero lost parking places as a result of this effort. And as again, we keep the cars, the drivers cool in the summer, dry in the rain, and snow-free in the winter. We have educational tools as well that are going to be put into the high school that will help the students learn about the benefits of clean energy. And we're designing this so it has unrestricted access for school buses, fire trucks, and any snow plows. In fact, it will reduce the need for snow plowing in the winter. So those are some of the benefits we have, in addition to the savings in electricity and the savings in costs and the reduction of our carbon footprint. So why would we pick Amoresco? I would let them maybe talk about that at this point. Mike, would you like to address that?
Sure. I mean, I'll speak real quick and then Tony, you can take it. But, Amoresco had the pleasure of being in partnership with Westwood Schools going back to the first solar installation a few years back. We've been around and local since for almost 22 years. The company was actually conceived of, if most of you folks remember, the old Joe's American Bar and Grill in Dedham across from Legacy on cocktail napkins. And from there, three of us started the company and have over the years grown it with a great team like Tony and Paul and others. We're based in Framingham. We have 171 people just in Massachusetts. We actually have invested over almost $250 million just in the Commonwealth. The company has been publicly traded since 2010, implementing over $11 billion in renewable energy solutions across North America and Europe. And now we have grown from 3 people up to 1,300 people. I think we've proven to be a great partner of the town. And I look forward to trying to expand this project to incorporate more savings and also act as a hedge for the risk that Tom alluded to with regards to the spiking of the energy prices. Next slide.
The next slide here is a aerial view of the layout that we have proposed for the parking lot. And this, again, if I go to the next slide, it shows it a little further. And I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this and how we took all of the stakeholders to the degree we could into account. Well, originally, we had this thing laid out in both parking lots. We moved it all over to the student parking lot for a number of reasons. If you look at it this way, it keeps the right side wide open so that on Westwood Day, all of the stages and everything else are still able to be put up and there's still a lot of freedom, and the canopies could serve as in place of tents for anybody that has exhibits. On the other side, on the faculty lot, that's still left wide open. So any of the taller vendor exhibits and the stage at the other end are all left wide open and free for whatever needs they might have. Also, by keeping the faculty lot open, we preserved an area that could be used for some of the activities for the high school graduates. And that was another concern. And by keeping the left side open, during the summer camping procedure, the recreation department was concerned that some kind of free access be kept so the kids could get from the recreation department over to the field. So all of these stakeholders, all of their inputs were taken into account to the degree possible. And when we came up with all of the things that we had to think about, this became a good option to account for all the needs for that area, and at the same time provide us with a very, very significant solar project that generated a lot of electricity. The last thing, of course, you could see that if you, I think on the next slide, it's even more apparent, or 2 slides down, to go to the next one again, you can see on this rendering here that over by the field, where we have the canopies going over the field to a slight extent, then we have that concrete pathway being built, and that'll allow people who are handicapped or whatever to have a shaded and protected area where they can watch any of the activities or the games on the field. It allows them easy access to get to that as well. So these were all the thoughts that we had and all the things that came into account as we worked on. The next slide will show you the Council on Aging, and it's an aerial view. And this aerial view shows the area that we're going to cover with canopies. Essentially, we end up with covering the entire area that's in the parking lot now and another area behind. This design allowed us to preserve trees, even in the case of the closeness on the left side, you see, to the top lot. We took a smaller cut in the size of the canopy arrays to avoid having to take down any trees there. So we'll be taking down some of the dead bushes and a few things there, but other than that, we're preserving most of all of the significant foliage in this area. And again, we have the enthusiastic endorsement of the people at the Council on Aging in terms of what this will do for them in terms of their costs of operation in the future. The next slide shows a little bit about the police station. And here, again, where we have like a garage thing, we had to look and talk to the fire chief to be sure that there was access to the roofs in case of a fire. He said he saw no problem because there were a number of ways to get to the roof. And the police chief likes this layout because it keeps all of the weather essentially off the vehicles. There have been accidents with people coming to work and slipping on the ice and hurting themselves. And he was concerned with days lost of productivity. And this kind of an arrangement would help it. Again, it almost eliminates the need for any significant plowing in the wintertime. I didn't mention all of the canopy arrangements that we've decided have water handling systems to direct any melt away from any areas where it would be dripping, where we might have a hazard. The next slide will show you what's contemplated a little bit for Hanlon and for the new Hanlon. And you can see there at the Deerfield, it's very straightforward. The flat parts of the roof are being used and a little bit of the front part there in the beginning of the thing. Again, this is a building that we have is a very sound building and a building that's going to be kept in the town in various uses over the next few years. So it behooves us to do as much as we can now there. And again, the big layout, the rough layout for the new Hanlon School shows you where the canopies, whether the rooftop solar panels will be put. The New Hanlon Deerfield School was designed with the idea that we may add solar. So that's why it was very convenient for the layout. The design itself basically took into account and made sure that, for example, there were no shadowings, that the orientation of the buildings was right, and so forth, to maximize the optimal, and they could optimize it rather for rooftop solar. we're not the first, as you can see from the next slide. There have been a lot of different towns that have gone ahead into done the same thing in the town of Natick and Wayland, Lexington and Newton. All have done similar things in their yards. In fact, we're probably late in terms of getting a lot of this done, but they have done it to greater extent, and they're very happy with the results. There have been no significant effects or anything that was the problems that they had. And when do we think we can get all this done? Well, if we're very optimistic, it might be the summer of 2023. If we're a little pessimistic and we run into some problems with supply, which is probable, not possible, then it might have to be delayed until the summer of 24. But we would be starting on everything as soon as possible on the other locations. But the high school parking lot itself would have to be at a time in the summertime when the students are not around and the space is available. So that's kind of a quick overview of the phase 2 solar that we're proposing. And now maybe some of the, Lemma, you can take over and go over some of the frequently asked questions that people have been having about what we're trying to do here.
Thank you. Yeah, we've summarized some of the highlights in terms of frequently asked questions that we've encountered so far in our conversations on this project, especially the high school solar canopies project, which is the anchor project in phase 2. So I want to just run through some of those here. Of course, a very important question for me as finance director has been, how much does this cost? And there is no construction or maintenance cost for the schools or the town for the 20-year time frame of the agreement. Ameresco pays for the engineering, procurement, construction, and the ongoing maintenance. Westwood does purchase the power generated by the arrays at a price that's lower than the market rate, and therefore that's how we project that we'll be saving money on electricity through this project. Will it increase taxes? So because there is no cost for the construction or maintenance, no, there should be no increase to taxes as a result of this project. One benefit of the project is that we anticipate that we'll be paying a reduced price for the electricity and that it'll be well under the market rates at the time when we start paying market rates for electricity again. So, I mean, this could save us money for sure. Will it take away from school and community needs? We don't anticipate any of that. So as Tom referenced, there have been a lot of conversations with stakeholders. This project and the funding that's required for this project is separate from any other school or community programs. And so we're not putting any upfront costs here. We will continue to use the power that's generated from the arrays to power our schools as a source of electricity. We'll pay Ameresco for that power in lieu of paying another external provider, such as Eversource, but we don't anticipate there'll be any other losses. And we've spoken to a number of different stakeholders on that. So the next slide has a few more of these frequently asked questions. So who's responsible for maintenance and costs? I've alluded to this a little bit, but it's important to mention Ameresco covers all of the maintenance, the inverter replacements. That's the technology that's in the panels, and any of the associated costs of the canopy and the components, as well as any damage that may occur. So if a ball ends up, colliding with any of the panels and they're broken, even if it is our fault or the fault of a student or a community member that was using one of the fields, it's still covered because Ameresco is going to be responsible for an insurance policy that will cover this sort of damage. What safety and security measures will be included? So we have, I think, included all the bells and whistles that we could have included in these projects. In particular, in the high school solar canopy design, we've made sure that there will be LED lighting under the canopies, and there is capacity for, through that LED lighting, just like a little bit more of a safe environment. And I think, Tom, you alluded to the fact that there's a walkway that will be a handicapped accessible walkway that we will gain when the project is installed in the high school parking lot. We've also ensured that the panels have the capacity to move like rain away from the cars so that we won't be dealing with rain and ice challenges. Will the structure be protected from accidents or people driving into it? The solar canopy is made of steel, and the standard design uses a 36-inch diameter concrete foundation, so it's very well supported, and should a driver bump into it, they would damage their vehicle before damaging the structure. We don't want any of these accidents, but we have spoken with other towns. And I believe, Tom, you reached out to some other communities, but so did Superintendent Emily Parks. She reached out to other superintendents and districts that have installed these canopies on high school campuses, and they've assured us that they haven't seen a lot of these kinds of collisions, and that it wasn't at all a concern that we should be worrying about. That's it there. And so for just a few last frequently asked questions, will it affect parking was a common one. So we've spoken to Ameresco about this, and by locating the foundation at the center of the parking lot, so the foundations for the canopies will be positioned kind of in the middle between two parking rows. That means that there'll be a reduced infringement on parking spaces. They anticipate it'll be about 18 inches. Parking spaces won't be lost. There may be some parking spaces that will be designated as compact spaces, and how many of those we'll know more when the design is finalized. But it's correlated with a number of columns that are required. We have looked at the number of the spaces that will be converted to compact, and it doesn't exceed the regulations, so we will still be within the town of Westwood regulations for parking. And what is the implementation timeline? The implementation process for the canopies, including permitting and contracts, could take up to 2 years. So it's quite possible that we will not be able to complete or even begin construction next summer. This may have to wait until the summer after. And then finally, when will construction happen and how long will it take? The goal is for the bulk of the construction to occur during the summer months to minimize interference with school activities. So we anticipate that this is certainly something we'll have to schedule around. I think that those are all my frequently asked questions. Are there a few more? A few more. How tall are the solar canopy structures? So standard design is 13 or more feet tall. This accommodates heavy vehicles or large vehicles underneath it, including school buses, snow plows, fire trucks. How will snow, ice, and plowing be handled? Our director of facilities has looked at these plans, and he's actually thrilled because he anticipates that there'll be less plowing needed. There will still be some around the canopies at the high school because they're not contiguous, so they are broken up, but it'll be a little bit less pressure on our staff and on the DPW staff, who particularly do a lot to clear our lots during the winter. The design of the lot, the canopies that we have been working on for the Westwood High School lot in particular helps direct snow and ice away from vehicles and pedestrians, is what I was referencing before. So the canopy will have stormwater and snow melt management features to prevent icing in the parking spaces. And then finally, what's the lifespan of the panels being used? Solar panels typically last for 25 or more years, but they start to lose their efficiency over time. Newer installations allow the owner to swap out the deteriorating panels for new panels and still leverage the infrastructure and the framing. So the town of Westwood and Westwood schools would have the option to purchase the panels from Ameresco at a discount after 20 years. If we did so, we could leverage the fact that we've got this infrastructure and framing that's been constructed for us. We need to replace some panels, we might be able to do that and get greater electric production out of them, especially if our existing panels have started to deteriorate. But there would be a net benefit potentially to the schools or to the town. So we'd have to look at the financials on that, and it may be lucrative for us, especially if electric costs are higher at that point. I think those are all my frequently asked questions, and that closes our portion of the presentation. So I can transfer to Julie, and maybe we can start to look at any questions from the public.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom, Lemma, and Mike. So just a reminder again, if you have a question or comment, if you can please type it into the chat function, and please include your name and your address as well. So we do have one question in the chat from John Hickey, 117 Sunrise Road. The question is, how many trees are being removed? Maybe Tom, do you want to take that question?
Sure. At the only place where there are trees, it would be the Council on Aging at the entrance. And again, we're avoiding that there by putting a pole that would be essentially in the middle of it. And essentially the only areas that are touched is Central Ireland, where there's a big tree now and thing that's not touched at all. And most of the parking is pushed to the back. So the only thing that's affected will be some relatively bad such bushes that are there now. So there's no significant cutting of the trees at all at the Council on Aging. The one concern was the tot lot where we were close, but we chose then to somewhat shrink the size of the canopies to avoid those few trees that were involved. And it wasn't a matter of cutting the trees down there, it was a matter of heavy trimming or cutting them because they were shadowing the canopies, but by eliminating a certain piece of the canopies, we eliminated the problem.
Great, thanks, Tom, for that. So I see another question in here from Bob Rich at 34 York Way. The question is, Lemma mentioned private funding in the Q&A section. Can you please explain why we would need private funding? Thank you. Maybe Lemma, you want to take that?
Yes, for the 20-year life of this agreement, there is no upfront cost, so we don't need public or private funding for it. Where we might need to consider some funding questions is at the end of the 20-year life, if we decide to purchase the arrays and retain them on school or town property, and then they become our asset. So there might be a small cost. We anticipate that would be a low cost. Honestly, the answer to that question may have been a bit misleading because it really is a non-issue here. The benefit of the way we're structuring this agreement is that the town and the schools avoid putting up any funding up front, and we are able to benefit from the arrays without having to do that. The alternative would have been to procure our own and construct them, and that would probably have entailed some borrowing or some, specific allocation from town funds.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lemma. Peter Schuler, I see your name and address, but I don't see a question. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm now seeing your question, Peter. Thank you. So Peter Schuler, 779 Gay Street. I am just wondering if the town could be the owner of the system rather than just leasing the space to Amoresco, who would then receive the financial incentives. Not suggesting we do that, just wondering if that was even a possibility. I don't know, Tom, do you want to take that one or?
As we mentioned, initially, this is not so under the Inflation Reduction Act that was just passed, where as a town, we can't take advantage of the 30% tax credits that are given. We now could, but of course, we're well into the project. And when we look at the economics, I don't really see the difference. We would still be then retaining somebody like Amoresco to build it. So the difference between us getting the tax credits from the federal government directly and financing it ourselves versus letting Amoresco take the tax credits and do all the building and take all the responsibility and avoid having the town to put up any financial work at all at this point is what we chose. We do have the option anytime, really, as early as 5 years after the 30% tax credit is worked off. After that, and whatever depreciation is involved, we could probably buy out the system ourselves, and then we would be faced with retaining somebody like Amoresco to keep it going, and we would pick up all the other incidental costs, and we might have a higher rate of return on our investment, depending on how we do it. But all of that analysis remains to be seen down the road a little bit. And I think at this point, we feel that the least impacting economic alternative is a power purchase agreement where all of the costs are picked up by outside investors, and then we have the option down the road if we wish to take over the system someplace between now and the 20th year. We do get it around the 20th year in any event, and we would make a choice at that point to go forward. Even obviously we would go forward assuming this project was viable after that as well. So, but anytime after 5-6 years, we would probably be making the analysis of whether or not it's in our financial interest to take it out, buy out the systems.
Tom, a couple other points. As far as the tax credits go, what we do is Amoresco essentially monetizes it, and it gets reflected or given back to the town in the form of a reduced rate. So the reality is that we're not keeping the tax credits and pocketing it. We're monetizing it and lowering the rate to the town. And the other thing I would say is that we do a huge book of business with municipalities. Most municipalities don't want to be in the business of developing, owning, and operating a power generation station, let alone for 20 years. And the risks associated with it is just not typically their core, let alone procuring the capital for it. When it competes, you start competing with capital for other needs, whether it's the schools or other town projects. That's why I think if you look across the Commonwealth and quite frankly, across most of the US, more times than not, municipal will have the structure that the town of Westwood's chosen.
Okay, thank you. So there was a follow-up question from John Hickey. The question is, will the canopies be over the trees? And also, can you show a visual? Tom, would you like me to go back to the Council on Aging
We are
visual?
developing renderings. We don't have a formal rendering right now that we could show you. We just have the helioscope, which shows roughly where the panels are going to go.
Yeah, I'm not sure of John's question, but the canopies themselves won't be above any tree, there won't be any trees under the canopies. The canopies, I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, they're about 13 feet in height. So, I mean, if the question is whether trees are under the canopies or just if the canopies are taller than trees, most of the trees.
Concerned about Mike, about the displacement of trees, taking trees out when we put up the canopies.
Oh, I thought you answered that question already about whether trees are going to be, how many would be removed.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have another question from Claire Galkowski, 320 Dover Road. Would it be possible for a portion of the annual savings on electricity to be put aside for future purchase and maintenance after the 20 years?
I think it's an interesting proposal. I mean, what's hard about it's certainly possible. Mechanically it's possible. I think we just need to make a decision about where and when we want to use those savings, and whether, in real time, there may be some compelling places where they need to be used to offset rising costs in the operating budgets, either at the school or the town side, or whether we're better off like reserving them and building kind of some account where we can leverage later and use to purchase the panels.
I mean, there's no reason why the town at any point in this whole process won't look at all of this on a cost benefit basis, and we'll do what we feel is financially the best deal for the town. And right now we feel the power purchase agreement is the best way to go.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Wanted to give folks just one more minute to see if there's anything else that people have questions on or would like to make comments on. Okay, not seeing any more questions. So, actually one more. So this question is from Dan Klein, 7 Windmill Lane. Having looked at solar for my own home recently, the PPA did not seem like the best option for Massachusetts residents. Did the numbers comparison exist anywhere for review? For residents, after factoring in the 30% tax rebate, it seems it was a better option.
I mean, I don't know how to answer that necessarily. The residential is a completely different ballgame because the size is so much smaller than all the ones that we're looking at here. Maybe you have an idea, Mike, how it compares.
Well, I think you're spot on. The reality is that it's all about critical mass. And if you remember, without the high school canopy, the project economics were not going to look good because you need that critical mass. It's as simple as that. And I think this project obviously nets the town savings because we're able to get the right size project to amortize the cost over many more kilowatt hours.
So Mike, I just want to
I
add
wonder,
to the team that on the residential program on the SMART, projects that are under a certain size, just like these, under 25 kW, receive a total different structure, incentive structure. So as you get bigger and bigger into projects, the larger they get, the incentive goes down. So that's a big factor in this whole calculation.
I wonder, Mike or Paul, or if you can give us a sense of the construction cost of canopies, like the size that we're discussing here, either for the schools or the town, just for a sense of scale, because I think it might be helpful for people to think about just from a tax perspective or, borrowing perspective, what the town might be undertaking if it did decide to proceed with constructing or owning one of its own arrays like this.
As an
Yeah,
example,
and I'll turn it over to Paul to give you guys a budget or a ballpark, but these projects that are proposed here are far more expensive than your typical rooftop because of all the steel involved. So it's you don't want to compare. No one's going to probably do canopies at their house, right? You don't want to compare canopies cost per kilowatt hour or kilowatt to your residential rooftops. But Paul, if you have a budget or anything, ballpark.
on the low end, we're dealing with Mike at about $3.80 a watt. So you're dealing with about $4.5 to $5 million on the CapEx for the project. So
the capital investment required, if the town were to invest, would be about somewhere close to 5 million on the low end, not including OpEx.
correct, no OpEx.
That's why these projects take up to 20 years to get your investment back and your return.
So these are that would be the upfront cost, and you're saying by not including OpEx, not including operating expenses for the project for the 20-year lifespan, in case like that insurance policy that Ameresco would purchase or any other expenses.
That's all
involved
extra.
with
What Paul just gave you was
maintaining
an estimate on the CapEx.
I mean, I would say we certainly did have these conversations. Tom and I had these conversations with Ameresco and separately as well in the process of looking at this phase 2 package and proposal. And we just found that it was not realistic for us to really be able to come forward to the town with a better option, especially an option that Westwood could own, and to do so in a short time frame. So, I mean, here we're proceeding on a project, and given the current supply chain delays, we forecast that it might take us 2 years to complete construction and bring it online. If we were as a town or as a school system to try to construct and own our own, it will be delayed further. And in the meantime, we're paying high electric rates. So those were some of the trade-offs because we aren't certainly experts in this area. This isn't the type of business that we're in day to day. We think about schools and we're thinking about students.
But that's the norm across the US. As I mentioned earlier, most municipalities go this structure. They don't get into the business of developing, building, owning, and operating energy generation assets. And you touched upon the schedule, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but the longer before these projects go operational, the grant programs continue to drop in terms of subsidies from the Commonwealth.
Yeah, under the SMART program, we're on a declining block. So as the blocks fill up, the incentive goes down. Correct, totally correct. The one thing I want to add is, people are saying, well, $3.80 a watt, $4 a watt, $4.5 million. Out of that $3.80 a watt, $4 a watt, just to give you an idea, the panels that we buy, just the panels alone out of that number are running between 50 and 55 cents a watt just to buy it. Just to give you a frame of reference. I don't know if that means anything to folks, but that's what it costs us to buy it.
All right, we've got a couple other comments in the chat. Peter Schuler, 779 Gay Street says, I very much appreciate this canopy approach that addresses a wave of opposition to tree removal from wooded areas. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for that comment. Appreciate that. There's also a question from Kathy Shinopoulos at 106 Colburn Street. I wonder if it's worth the change in the design just to avoid cutting down a couple of trees. Won't we be losing some of the benefits of the project by reducing the number of panels? Another option would be to plant a couple of trees elsewhere. I think this comment might be in regards to the Council on Aging questions.
I'll speak up on that quick, Julia, and only because I have a 3-year-old that uses that tot lot a lot. And I think the fact is as much as I'd love to add more panels in that area, the shading that the tot lot gets from those trees is a far much of a benefit. And I obviously experience it firsthand from my own child. So as much as we like to make the project bigger, I wouldn't recommend it. And in that area. And then, going further, if you remember at the high school, we actually looked at doing even a bigger project, but there was some great feedback from one of those school committee members that said it could interfere with Westwood Day and other events. And so we actually shrunk that down as well. So I think, at least from our side, there's been a tremendous amount of collaboration and thought put into the design we have today with the school committee and others key stakeholders. And as much as I love to expand it, of course, the town can do whatever they want. I think we've maximized the opportunity that we have in the town with the design we have.
Yeah, and then just finally commenting on the tot lot, where we're looking at a very small percent. I mean, we're looking at, I think it's less than 5% effect on the size of the project itself at the Council on Aging. So in the bigger picture, it's insignificant. Even in that particular project itself, it's not significant.
All right, great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So if there isn't anything else, I want to thank our speakers for their time tonight, thank the community for their participation. And this session will be recorded and posted to the town website. So thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.